This video. Hi, Keith here with another video. Hope everyone is doing well. This video will be on Greenland. If you enjoy my content, please like and subscribe. I live in Maine, Northeast U.S., and they predict a storm today. It's not doing too badly right now. Last night, this is January 26th, Monday. Last night, Sunday night, it was really bad weather. Very windy, very cold, and some snow buildup. They're advising people to stay off the roads. My workplace is closed. So, I'm staying home making a video. This is on Greenland. A lot of weird things happening in the world, in the U.S. Everyone who's been following this last few weeks, ICE has been on a rampage in Portland, Oregon, Minneapolis. 2 people were killed within a week and a half in Minneapolis. And early this morning or yesterday, a woman was shot, third shooting there. Not killed, but her hand was blown off, and people are outraged by this. People are totally outraged by this, and there was a huge protest in Minneapolis. Not a general strike, but a huge protest against this. Okay, and I may make a future video about this. And strong possibility of a U.S. war against Iran. The U.S. naval ships are within firing range of Iran. The Abraham Lincoln, the carrier group, is within range of Iran. I may strong possibility of a U.S. attack against Iran in the near future. I don't know what's going to happen. Okay, so another part of the mix is Trump wants to annex Greenland. This has been going on for a while. People of Greenland are dead set against it, and I'll discuss this. So Greenland is considered the world's largest, geographically the world's largest non-continental island. Australia is larger, it's a continent. Australia is the world's largest non-continental island. What this means is it's 840,000 square miles in area, or 2,166 square kilometers. It's 3 times the size of Texas, about the size of Saudi Arabia. Old school, like Mercator map projections, I'll try to get a photo of that. Old school Mercator map projection makes it seem like it's even larger, like it's the size of North America, which is nonsense. It's not true, and I don't know why they do that, but it is distorted. Greenland is large, but not that large. 80% of it is covered by ice, the Greenland ice sheet. Also, about 80% of it is north of the Arctic Circle. Population is about 56,000. 90% of those are Inuit people. Used to be called Eskimos. The preferred term is Inuit. Eskimos considered a derogatory term. The Inuit people came from Siberia. They were the eastern area in eastern Siberia, Yakutia. I believe they're the last of the indigenous peoples to come to the Western Hemisphere. They came to the Western Hemisphere about 1,000 years ago. Inuit populations exist in Siberia, in Alaska, northern Canada, Quebec, and to Greenland. They came to enter Greenland about 700 years ago. There were earlier cultures, earlier peoples in Greenland, and it's kind of an interesting story. I believe, like something close to 5,000 years ago, 4,500 years ago, we have the first archaeological culture in Greenland, the Sukuk people. Sukuk. There were other groups. There was archaeological cultures. There's Independence 1, Independence 2, the Dorset culture. The last of these was the Dorset culture. And they disappeared by around 1500, as far as I understand. Anyway, so the Inuit people came to Greenland probably around 1200 to 1400 AD, or Common Era CE, as they say. The last of the groups. Okay, they entered from northern Greenland, came from what's now Canada, went south. The Vikings came to Greenland. For him is Eric the Red, or Erika Thorvaldsen. In the year was 986. Eric Thorvaldsen came to Greenland 986. He and his father were involved in a murder case in Iceland. They murdered someone, so they were exiled, or Eric the Red was exiled for 3 years from Iceland. So he launched this huge expedition to Greenland to establish settlements in Greenland, like 14 ships. They're mostly Icelanders, some people from Norwegians, a few people from Denmark. Huge expedition, and had some settlements in Greenland. The term Greenland, it's a misnomer. Of course, Groenland, something like Groenland in Danish or in Scandinavian, Groenland. It was warmer than it is now. Back then, it was like the 10th century. It was somewhat warmer than it is now. There's more meadowlands, but it was still under ice. It was still an iceberg, or under ice, very much under ice. And it was propaganda. Name was obviously propaganda. Greenland was supposed to kick off settlement, like Viking settlement of North America, and some extent did. Eric the Red's son, Leif Erikson, launched explorer had settlements in what's now Newfoundland, Labrador, and they did explore North America. Well, there was what's happened. It was called the Little Ice Age around the 1400s, 15th century into like the 19th century. Made that region much colder. You can think of an alternate history with the Vikings. The Norse settled North America a couple hundred years before other Europeans did. Okay. Anyway, so there were Vikings estimated there were between 3,000 and 6,000 people in the Norse settlements. There were three settlements in Greenland, and they traded with Europe. They were known to Europe. They traded walrus, ivory, things like that, with fish, they traded with Europe. They were converted to Christianity. They were part of Europe, I guess. And we don't know what happened. They died out. By about early 1400s, Europe lost contact with them. They completely died out. The climate became much harsher, and they pretty much vanished. Might have starved to death. Some of them might have gone back to Iceland. Probably a lot of them did. There's a historian, Roy Casagrande. Here's a YouTube channel, which is interesting. I've been watching him recently. He's good. He's interesting with ancient history. But with modern history, he's kind of a liberal in a lot of ways. I wouldn't agree with his politics, but he talked a little bit about the history of Greenland. What happened is at the point they were reduced to eating decayed shark meat. He says, they used dogs. Hopefully, they killed their dogs as bait to get sharks. And the sharks, however, sharks in the Arctic drink their own urine as a way. They use it as antifreeze. So what the Norse settlers had to do, they took these sharks and they had to, I don't know how this works, but they had to keep it outside for weeks so the urine would dissipate and they could eat it. And they actually were eating decayed shark meat in the end. Anyway, it's believed they died out. The Inuit people might have contacted them, had some contact with the Inuit. They might have been absorbed by the Inuit. We don't really know what happened to them. Anyway, so they were gone. So it was believed in Europe for a long time the Norse were still there, even though they lost contact with them. And they were the European explorers in the 16th, 17th, 18th century passed by that area, explored it. Apparently there were some English fishing villages in West Greenland for a time, but they weren't permanent settlements. So Denmark, kind of complicated, but Denmark thought they had some claim, or the ruling groups in Denmark had some claim over Greenland. There was even though the settlers were from Iceland or Norway, most of them, for a few Danes, but there was what they call Scandinavian Union, the Kalmar Union. I don't want to get into this too much, but so complicated, like dynastic succession. Denmark thought they had a claim over Greenland. They took an interest in. So they wanted to reestablish contact with the Viking settlers there, and supposedly bring them back to Christianity. It was believed if they were still there and they were Christians, they were technically Catholic. They missed out on the Protestant Reformation. So in one case, or perhaps they regressed back to paganism, all the way back to paganism. Either way, bring them to Protestant Christianity. Denmark was a Lutheran country. Bring them back to Lutheran Protestant Christianity. So 1721, they launched Denmark had this big expedition, missionary expedition, led by this guy, Hans Egede, who was a Lutheran missionary. He had a team working for him. They had this big expedition, went to Greenland, and they found that the Norse had died out. The Norse were gone. So they converted the Inuit people. And there was apparently happened gradually. Inuit people would adopt elements of Christianity into their shamanistic religion, gradual, but they became thoroughly Christianized. And there was a big upheaval in Inuit culture. There were people who were very well adapted to living in the Arctic, but their culture was was sort of destroyed. They were later brought into, many people were encouraged to settle a nuke, what was called Godab, and used for labor, for whaling industry, things like that. Okay, 1776, Denmark kind of asserted total control over it. They blocked off Greenland from foreign trade, or anybody visiting it or trading it. Trading with Denmark had to get permission from the Danish government. And in a lot of ways, Greenland was cut off from the outside world really until the 1940s. Early 1930s, there was some kind of dispute between Norway and Denmark. Norway had some claim, thought they had a claim to the east coast of Greenland. It was arbitrated by, I think it was the International Court of Justice, then connected with the League of Nations, and they ruled in favor of Denmark. Of course, those countries, it was a little while before the Second World War. I think they had other things to worry about at that time. But anyway, they ruled in favor of Denmark. 1941, Denmark was occupied by Nazi Germany during the Second World War, and they had a social democratic government which kind of tried to placate the Nazis. It was very controversial. They deported several hundred communist members of the Danish Communist Party, and some of these were sent to concentration camps or killed. But other than that, they tried to just keep the Nazis out of their way, try to placate them, and just try to keep some independence for Denmark. Okay, well, there was a Danish ambassador. U.S. occupied Greenland. The Danish ambassador to the U.S. guy named Heinrich Kaufmann, and he signed a treaty allowing the U.S. to occupy Greenland without consulting anyone in Denmark. And in fact, Denmark had two governors in Greenland then. He didn't consult them. He just did it entirely on his own. And Denmark, they judged him, he was accused of treason. They summoned him back to Denmark. He wisely did not go back to Denmark. He possibly would have been shot or sent to a concentration camp. Who knows what would have happened? He wisely did not. And later, after the war, Second World, Denmark ruled. They ruled that it was justified. They backed them up. Well, think about this treaty, though. One controversial Article 10 gives the U.S. the right to militarily occupy Greenland. Article 10 of this, though, gives the U.S. the sole right to change the treaty. Essentially meant the U.S. could stay there as long as it wanted to. That was controversial. Okay. After the war, so U.S. had at the peak some 50 bases in Greenland. Had about 50 bases in Greenland. There was interesting the meteorological war, not well-known part of the Second World War. Germany had a bunch of meteorological research stations in Western Greenland during this time. And mostly the U.S. was able to seize them. They used Inuit people with dog sled teams who took these bases, and they drove the Germans out of Greenland. Interesting story. Okay. After the Second World War, there was some friction between Denmark and the U.S. because the U.S. did not want to leave. U.S. military essentially does whatever it wants to. The U.S. military did not want to leave. And in fact, U.S. military had a major meteorological research project led entirely by Americans in Greenland. And the Danish government was worried about their sovereignty being eroded. Similar thing was going on in Canada, northern Canada as well. The U.S. had a major meteorological research project in Canada, and the Canadian government was a little nervous about this. It's totally run by the U.S., and they were doing it on their own. So in Denmark, there was a project like late 40s, I guess, to get as many Danish meteorologists get them to Greenland to try to outcompete the Americans to assert Danish control over Greenland. It didn't quite work. They couldn't find enough people. In 1946, the U.S. offered to buy Greenland for $100 million in gold bullion, equivalent of $1 billion today. Denmark turned it down. The U.S. was putting enormous pressure on Greenland at this time as well. Finally, 1949, Denmark joined NATO. one of the reasons for that they wanted to like regulate the U.S. Okay, we can't get rid of the Americans. Let's just regulate them so we have some, guidelines of what they can do. 1951, there was a treaty. Finally, it was Denmark signed a treaty giving the U.S. a right to bases and regulating what the U.S. could do. Gave the U.S. pretty much free reign in military, free reign in Greenland, but at least it's some kind of regulated somewhat. Okay, there are a couple of incidents. There's the main U.S. base. It's still there, Camp Thule. It's pronounced Thule. It's spelled Thule. I used to use Thule, but it's Thule. Pronounced Thule. U.S. base there. It's still there. It's Thule Air Base. Now it's been renamed Pfennig Space Base, but still there. It's in northwestern Greenland. It was expanded in the early 50s, like in 1953. And when they did this, something like 112 people who lived in the area were forcibly removed. They had they were just given a few days' notice that they were forcibly removed. They built another village for them a ways away, and a lot of people were really, really upset about this. Finally, in 2003, the Danish Supreme Court ruled that this was illegal. It was illegal. It was a human rights abuse. They awarded them some compensation. The Thule tribe, was awarded some like 500,000 Danish krona, and I'm not sure how much is worth in contemporary U.S. dollars. Not nearly that much. Maybe $20,000-$30,000. Individuals also got awarded something. However, the Danish Supreme Court also stipulated that because of the 1951 treaty, these people would not be allowed to return to their old village, their old houses. They would not be allowed to do that. So, okay. Other things. It was 1968. Sorry. Before I get to that, there was something called Camp Century, which was about 100 miles from Thule, Camp Thule. Camp Century. It was U.S. base, ostensibly for meteorological research, cold weather combat research. The U.S. opened this in 1959 without telling anyone, first of all. The Danish government only found out by accident at a cocktail party in D.C. Someone told the Danish ambassador, he only found out by accident. Anyway, it was ostensibly cold weather meteorological research. Okay. It's rumors that there was U.S. conducted bacteriological research there. We don't know this for sure, but something we do know for sure is, and there actually was some valuable meteorological research was done at Camp Century, but the real reason for this was that it was cover for something called Project Iceworm, which was a U.S. military project for a vast mobile nuclear launch system. It was supposed to be at the height. It would there were tunnels and railroad tracks under the ice, a vast system of tunnels, and there were mobile nuclear missile launch bases which would go back and forth in these tunnels, vast tunnel system. At the height, it was planned to be like 3 times the size of Greenland, size of Denmark. It was powered by the world's first mobile nuclear reactor, underground nuclear reactor. And I believe like 3 miles of tunnels were actually completed. It was discontinued in 1960, released, discontinued in 1963 because they found out it wasn't technically feasible. The glacier is shifting, the ice sheet's shifting, and the tunnels would have been broken up. Technically, it wasn't feasible to do. It would have been dangerous for the people who live there. There were a tight 200 people there in this under the ice city they were building. Really, there was apparently a shopping mall, a movie theater, restaurant, stuff like a whole complex they were building. It was abandoned. It was discontinued in 1963. It was officially abandoned in 1966 and decommissioned in 1967. Thing is, though, it's believed there are like 300,000 liters of diesel fuel in this space still there. There's nuclear waste. I assume they got the nuclear reactor out, but there's nuclear waste. There are PCBs there, very environmentally very destructive. It's under the ice, supposedly sealed under the ice In the 2020s, I forget when, there's NASA, like LIDAR, found this space under the ice. It's sealed under the ice. It's believed like 80 years from now, 2100, estimates are that shifting glaciers will expose this extremely toxic chemicals, be very, very dangerous. And wherever the U.S. military has been, it's been environmentally very destructive. There's another incident. 1968, also outside Tule, a US B-52 bomber was carrying 4 hydrogen bombs, and it crashed. Basically, what happened is there was a cabin fire. There were 7 crew members, and 6 of them got out. One guy was killed, but 6 crew members got out. The plane crashed. They were able to evacuate. The plane crashed. There's a chemical explosion, big explosion, and it scattered the radioactive. She was carrying 4 hydrogen bombs. It was carrying spread radioactive debris over a huge area. Well, the U.S. and the Danish government had this massive cleanup operation, which supposedly got most of it. But the problem is, one hydrogen bomb is still missing, or the upper payload section of a hydrogen bomb is still missing. They haven't found it. It's under the ice somewhere, and I'm not sure how dangerous this could be, but these incidents created a lot of anger. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, with this Operation Iceworm, the U.S. again didn't tell the Danish government about this at all. Did not announce it. Oh, the Danish government only found out about Project Iceworm in 1997 in the 90s from declassified documents. And again, they found out by accident. Something like an archivist was researching something else and came across this and created. And not only that, but the Danish prime minister at the time also knew about Project Iceworm, but didn't bother telling anyone. So this created a lot of anger. That is, and then the later incident with the hydrogen bomb and the missing hydrogen bomb, the B-52 bomb, it created a lot of anger, fueled the independence movement. There's a big move for independence in Greenland. This fueled a big independence movement. Also, these were apparently violated. Denmark is supposed to be a nuclear-free zone. They're enthusiastic and NATO member, but there was a ban on nuclear weapons in Denmark, but this violated it, and Danish officials knew this was going on. So there's a lot of anger about this. Okay, more recently, there was what's called the Little Danes experiment. Started in 1951 until the 1960s. Basically, what happened is 22 Inuit children were taken from their parents under false pretenses and brought to Denmark. And they stayed with families there for a year. It was originally supposed to be orphans, but it didn't work. The experiment was utterly botched. It was highly paternalistic, for one thing, but it was utterly botched, one thing after another. They told the parents, we're going to bring them to Denmark for a month for like a summer vacation, be a good experience for them. And the parents said, okay. And once in Denmark, they apparently thought they had some diseases. They were kept in isolation for a while, and they didn't know what. Kids themselves didn't know what. The children were between ages 5 to 9, and they were totally confused. They didn't know what was going on. One time, the Queen of Denmark visited them, and it didn't mean anything to them. They had no idea what was going on. And they put these kids with foster families in Denmark for a year, and they could only speak Danish. They weren't allowed to speak their indigenous language, their native language. Then they were brought back to Iceland. Brought back to Greenland, put in orphanages where they only spoke Danish. They were not allowed to see their families. They rarely had meetings, very rare brief visits with their families. And it's a horrible thing. It was psychologically extremely traumatizing for these children. But it was sort of discontinued in the 1970s. Half had suffered mental illness. Half of them died in their early 20s and young adulthood. And most of them ended up living outside of Greenland. They lost their native language. They couldn't speak their language. They cut off from their culture, from their family. Psychologically extremely traumatizing. It was continued to a limited extent through the 1960s and 1970s. They had Inuit children, brought them to Denmark for shorter periods of time. This was also very bad results. It's believed the whole purpose of this, underneath it all, was to create a Danish-speaking ruling class for Greenland. knew a lead who would be Danish, incorporated Danish culture. It didn't work. Kids came out psychologically so traumatized. It was horrible. So there was started to be some buzz about this little dance experiment in the 1990s and early 2000s. One of the survivors of this was a woman named Helene Tyson. She did research on this and she wrote about this, and she was kind of an activist. And there was a move to and there was a lot of anger about this built up in Greenland. There were several lawsuits against the Danish government. For a long time, the Danish government actually refused to apologize for this. By the way, the Danish Red Cross and the Save the Children Fund is famous. They're still a nonprofit. I'm not a fan of these NGOs or nonprofits. They were complicit in this. They were totally complicit in this. And the Danish government came out and refused to apologize for a long time. They only officially apologized in 2022, where the Prime Minister of Denmark then went to Greenland. There were 6 survivors of this. 6 people were still alive, 6 veterans. He apologized to them like face to face. They got compensation, equivalent of 38,000 US dollars, which doesn't sound like a lot. It might go further in Greenland. Officially apologized. Kind of people thought that. So official apology came only in 2022. People pointed out it was really interesting that this was after Trump's first term, too, when, Denmark was when Trump wanted to take over Greenland, so Denmark was all of a sudden much nicer to the people of Greenland. Kind of interesting. So something even bigger than that is what was called different terms of the COIL campaign, or the COIL campaign, or the spiral COIL campaign, or the spiral case. Okay, what happened is it went from roughly speaking 1966 to 1975. I believe it went on a lot longer, actually. Half the childbearing population of Greenland was sterilized, forcibly sterilized, often without knowing about it. Sometimes children, girls as young as 12 were sterilized, and without consulting their parents, any consent from their parents at all. And it was pretty horrible. So half the population, half the women of childbearing age were sterilized. Around 4,000 women had this done to them. And it was a big case. It was kind of mostly ignored. Again, got into the public consciousness through several activists. There was a Nigel Libeth, a woman who had this done to them. She later became a psychologist. She became a psychologist researching indigenous people. And she wrote about her own experiences on Facebook in 2018. Series of Facebook posts. She brought a lot of public attention to this in Greenland and in Denmark. Before that, people didn't want to talk about it. It was some people want. And in 2022, there was a podcast run by Danish public radio, which became a big issue. Became a really big issue, and Danish Prime Minister accused Denmark of genocide. I think it was the right attempt to wipe out the Inuit people in Greenland. The genesis came from idea for modernization. Denmark wanted to modernize Greenland, but they couldn't. It was like modern infrastructure. They couldn't do that, so they figured the best ways to get rid of the people, I guess. And it was really traumatic thing. So Denmark agreed to. There's several lawsuits going. People can apply for compensation. I don't know the current situation. Some people have gotten some compensation, but nothing will undo this. Anyway, because it's Greenland today is facing something of a demographic crisis. Estimated by year 2040, which is 14 years from now, Greenland will have lost like 15% of their workforce. It's a demographic problem. Greenland today does have social problems. Very high alcoholism rate, world's largest suicide rate, partly stemming from the fact that their culture was devastated and destroyed. It's a northern country, and seasonal affective disorder may be part of it too. I'm not really sure. Greenland does have social problems. Now, so interesting things about Greenland. It's a they have a lot of social welfare benefits. free healthcare. We don't have this in the U.S. Free healthcare, free education, pretty extensive social welfare benefits. Greenland politics are very much part of like Scandinavian social democratic tradition. In Greenland, they don't have private land ownership. People like lease it for like 40 years, 50 years from the state. They don't have private land ownership. They own their own house, but they don't own the land. This is from the indigenous method of land ownership. They don't own it communally. They don't have individual land ownership. Industry is state run, pretty much heavily state run. One of the biggest main industry is fishing. Employs about half the population, half the workforce is fishing industry. It's owned by state-run companies. The other half, people, like 40% of the workforce works for the government. So pretty elaborate. Now the thing is, Greenland is heavily dependent on Denmark. By the way, before I get to that, 1978, Denmark held a referendum in Greenland for home rule. There was a huge activist movement in the 70s, stemming a lot of anger from the disasters that happened. Huge desire for home rule. There was a radicalization in the 70s, around the world as well, but big radicalization, big movement for independence in the 1970s. So Greenland had a referendum for self-rule, and they voted for it in 1979. Greenland got limited self-government, not a lot, but some limited control of their own. Denmark could still control natural resources and still had a lot of control, but they got limited self-rule. This actually, interestingly, fit in with the European Union. It was the European community made it easier for Denmark in some ways. Later on, there was another referendum in 2007, and they voted for a full self-rule. Passed in 2008. So Greenland has full self-government, except for defense and foreign relations. So it's considered an integral, like, self-governing part of the Kingdom of Denmark. The three parts, they are Denmark itself and the Faroe Islands and Greenland. They're all part of the Kingdom of Denmark. It's self-governing. So technically, it's not a colony anymore. They do have self-government. They have a prime minister, and they don't really completely control foreign affairs, so they do have a foreign minister and their own defense. But otherwise, they're sort of independent country and semi-independent country. There's a huge drive for independence. Okay. What's preventing full independence, anyways, is Greenland is heavily dependent on subsidies from Denmark. There's a complicated system of block grants, which, as far as I understand, is like close to $1 billion a year, $700 million to $1 billion a year in Greenland. And if they're independent, they lose this. Now, it's been criticized. Now, I think Greenland does have vast natural resources. It's believed to have the world's largest deposits of rare earth minerals, has zinc deposits, uranium deposits, and actually does have huge amount of what's called oil equivalent, which is type of shale, which can be made into oil. And the thing is, though, to get, and they Greenland is not a poor country. It's ranks 15 in GDP, national GDP. Not generally people that are not high income, lowest income of the Arctic countries, but it's not a super poor country either in some ways. So the deal is how to develop their natural resources. They can't have independence from Greenland. They'll lose these subsidies. So the big debate in Greenland, how to develop their natural resources in a way which they could replace the subsidies from Denmark. The problem is it's extremely expensive. Greenland has almost very little infrastructure. Estimated costs hundreds of billions of dollars to develop the infrastructure needed to exploit their natural resources. It'll also be possibly environmentally very destructive. That's the big issue that they're facing in Greenland. And there's Chinese investment. Apparently, a pretty large Chinese investment. I haven't been able to find out how much. It's 11%, covers 11% of Greenland's GDP. They have a rare earth mining operation in Gvenfeld, an area of rare earths. They are. China, it's very, very complicated. China owns shares of companies share in this company, mineral extraction, several consortium of companies. It's hard to really tabulate, but there's Chinese investment there. Some further Chinese development infrastructure was blocked by Denmark. China wanted to, I believe, buy and abandon a naval base to use as a port. It was blocked by Denmark on the grounds of national defense. So, also, okay, so, politics of Greenland is social democratic. For a long time, the ruling party was something called the Sumut Party. Sumuit means forward in Inuit. It was a Scandinavian style. It is still a Scandinavian style social democratic party. The first prime minister, epic figure in recent Greenland history, Jonathan Motzfeldt. He was the first prime minister in the Sumut Party. Sumite Party seems to have ties with the Lutheran Church. Most of the top leaders have been Lutheran priests. Have tied in with the Lutheran Church or school teachers. Kind of interesting. Is more of so the Sumite Party is social democratic party. They're socialist. They're social democratic party. Another party, probably the second biggest party, was called the pronounced Inuit Ataqatigiit. Inuit Ataqatigiit Party. They were or are a eco-socialist. They're what Wikipedia calls democratic socialist, means non-Leninist socialist party, but they were more to the left. When they were in power. When they came to power, they kind of moved more centrist. Had been criticized by people to their left by basically keeping a market system and not really moving. But they are more to the left. Ostensibly an eco-socialist party. The name means community of the people, and there were several other parties, much other splinters. These were the two main parties for a long time. In March of last year, what's called some center-right party came to power, called the Democratic Party, led by a guy named Jens Friedrich Nielsen. These are Inuit people who have Danish names, and they use Danish names often, but the Inuit people. Jens Friedrich Nielsen. Interestingly, he's part Danish. His father was Danish, and he grew up apparently in a low-income section of Nuuk, the capital, like the bad side of the tracks. And the fact that he didn't look Inuit and he came from a poor area, he was bullied in school. So because of that, he has interest in helping minorities, helping people who are left out. This Democratic Party is socially liberal. I think more in the European sense. They're a liberal party, want more free trade, but they also want to treat minorities better, things like that. And this was something of a bombshell in Greenland politics. There's something of a bombshell for Greenland politics. The motivation they find the coalitions with these other parties were defeated, who were in power for years. Mainly, the motivation was the fact the center-right party would be better able to protect social welfare benefits. Interestingly, the social democratic parties were not trusted as far as protecting health care, things like that. Kind of interesting. I don't know the details beyond that. Okay, so well known, Trump wants to acquire Greenland. Towards the end of his first term, he made a big thing about it. It sounded bizarre. Now again, in this term, he's also been the past year been talking about it a lot. He had a nasty phone conversation with the Prime Minister of Denmark at the beginning of his term. Legally, they're not legally, Denmark can't do this thing. Legally, Greenland they have the legal right to have an independence referendum, but as I mentioned, losing the natural resources, losing the subsidies from Denmark would be a problem, and there's a lot of debate about this. So there's a recent Davos forum. Trump went to Davos, and he really made a big thing about it, about acquiring Denmark, and he came off like unhinged. He came off really unhinged. So apparently Trump claimed to have negotiated with Mark Rutte, who is the Secretary General, the nominal political leader of NATO, for rights to Greenland. It was a little odd because Mark Rutte is not from Greenland. He's not Danish. He's Dutch. He's a hack politician, but he's Dutch. He has no authority to negotiate on behalf of Greenland or Denmark. And those countries were not even consulted about this. But anyway, Trump claimed to have reached a deal. It turns, and there's some Twitter accounts which claim that he got a lot of vast rights to military rights to Greenland, but Greenland and Denmark both said it's news to us. It's news to us. We don't know anything about this. Apparently Trump said that he claimed victory. He got an agreement on a framework for future discussion, which essentially means he climbed down. He for now climbed down. It may come back up. There's a lot of Trump is an extremely unstable figure. We don't know what happened. There are reports that the Greenland government is preparing for some sort of war. They're advising people to stock up on food and be ready for some type of long-term resistance if the U.S. actually does invade Greenland. I mean, the U.S. I mean, their population 56,000. The U.S. could take them over very easily, but it'll be a political catastrophe. And there's some buzz that NATO might break up. Macron in France said France will leave NATO if the U.S. illegally occupies Greenland. Other countries and other countries, there's a lot of tension within the NATO alliance. I'm totally okay if NATO breaks up. I mean, it'd be great. And there's also a lot of hypocrisy on the part of European leaders. I mean, they were totally okay. They just claim the U.S. is violating international law, which is absolutely true. They were totally okay when the U.S. kidnapped the president of Venezuela, when Trump's first term, Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State, literally threatened the families of the people in the International Criminal Court, like gangster attacks. They were mostly okay with all that. They were okay with so much crap that went on and on and on. Then it turns against them. Then there's karma. Then I don't know. I don't get me wrong. I would oppose U.S. Taking over Greenland myself. The U.S. has had a horrible track record with indigenous people. And it would be essentially a colony of the U.S. military, which is already environmentally extremely destructive, would be more destructive. I'd be okay with that. I'd be totally. I would not be okay U.S. taking over Greenland. So I don't know how things are going to play out. I'm doing this like late January. Trump temporarily looks like he backed down for now. He talked it down. I may bring it back up. Oh yeah, why is Trump doing this? Well, there's a character named Ronald Lauder, Lauder. He's the heir to the Estee Lauder fortune. His parents started Estee Lauder Cosmetics Company, and his brother died. He's the sole heir to it. He's worth $4.5 billion, billionaire. Very pro-Zionist, big donor to Zionist causes. Very big part of the Zionist movement. Also a big part of the MAGA movement. He's spent a lot of money on Trump and various MAGA causes. And big fan, he's one of the Trump people. And apparently it's believed this is his idea. John Bolton had an interview like last years ago where he claimed that Lauder was behind the screen. It's probably true, probably correct. It's known that Lauder does own. It's kind of complicated. Owns interest in mining companies in Greenland through kind of his business partners are Greenland politicians. Former politicians, including Vivian Motzfeldt, who was the foreign minister, the Greenland foreign minister, and some other people there apparently as business partners, which seems like there's a fair amount of corruption there. I don't really know what's in the mix there, but it doesn't look good. Ronald Lauder, interestingly, also has investments in Ukraine, which is in rare earths in Ukraine, which is backed by the U.S. government. Some of this is very complicated, extremely complicated, but he does have some interest in minerals in Ukraine, some investments there through some holding company, which is kind of backed by the U.S. government, by the way. And this is a group of corrupt cronies around Trump who are backing a lot of this. It'll be a disaster for the people. And I have no idea what's going to happen. One more thing I should mention, there's the Praxis City project, which is the Silicon Valley oligarchs are behind this. Ellison, Larry Ellison, is one of the big figures. I forget the chair of it is. It's a startup. It's called the Praxis Startup Project. Praxis Startup. It's a plan for some kind of high-tech libertarian city in Greenland, and be like no government. Space. These oligarchs could do whatever they want there. They'd have data mining. That's a motivation for Greenland. A lot of water, glaciers, data mining. Um, Data mining, space launches, a whole bunch of things like that. So the Danish government and the Greenland government both turned this down. They no, we don't want this. The project is an ongoing thing. They raised $4.5 million. One Twitter account thought this was kind of a scam. It's like a Ponzi scheme. They're going to raise all this money from lower level oligarchs, but it's not going to go anywhere, which is probably true. I don't really know. But if this is in the mix too, they're interested in getting Greenland. I don't know how it's going to play out. Part of this tech dystopia the oligarchs are planning, but I don't know how it's going to turn out. Anyway, I hope you enjoy my video, and please like and subscribe. And I'm working on, I have a contractor working on my house. He's doing a great job, but taking a long time. And hopefully I'll have my office. I have an office in the back of the house. Hopefully I'll be able to make these videos in an office, more of my own, like a studio. Anyway, hope you enjoy my content, and have a good day.